Lieutenant Colonel Lincoln S. Farish here, with my trusty Pipock. When you finally go outside the wire and you're on mission, one of the big things to remember is that not everyone thinks the same way we do. Not everyone has the same belief system. Not everyone's philosophy is the same. And if you don't take a realistic approach and understand the thought process behind the people you interact with, you can really get yourself jammed up. So we're going to break that down just a little bit with political systems. Now, as always, these are my thoughts, not USKPOC's, not the Army, not DOD. Let's get started, shall we? Individualism versus collectivism. Why our politics differ. Now, part of it is philosophy, how people think about the way things should be organized. Part of it is history. And I'm going to have to go general here because we're talking about 190 odd different countries, each with their own different idea of the way things should work. So you're going to need to know, for wherever you happen to be, what those differences are and how you can utilize those most effectively to help the combatant commander meet his mission objectives and to keep yourself safe. There are three potential fatal weaknesses that I've seen out in the field. The first is the false consensus effect. If me and all my friends think a government should be instituted this way, why would anyone choose it differently? That's about as smart as saying me and my friends all like the Detroit Lions and anyone who roots for another team is an idiot. It's a cognitive bias. Just because you and a bunch of people you know think similarly or enjoy the same things does not mean that anyone else does. There's also the projection, which is the tendency of people to project their own attitudes and beliefs onto others. What we call loyalty, or what we call betrayal, is not a universal constant. Not everybody sees it the other way. Some people think, hey, if I'm loyal to you today, I have done my job. But tonight, someone else pays me money, I'll tell them exactly where everybody is in your fob. And then there's ethnocentrism. And it's the application of one's own culture and ethnicity as a frame of reference to judge other cultures, practices, behaviors, and beliefs in people, instead of using the standards of the particular culture involved. Now, what this means is, if you're working somewhere where people have a different belief system, you have to understand that belief system, that philosophy, and you've got to work within it. And trying to bat your head up against it is going to lead you nowhere. Might also get you killed. Now, as an example, I'm going to use the concepts of political systems. And I'm mostly going to stick with Europe, but what's true in Europe is true-ish in the rest of the world. So as an example, the difference between the Declaration of Independence in 1776 and the Declaration of the Rights of Man and the Citizen in 1789. 1789, George Washington was president. So same time frame. But look at the differences. Okay? We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. Men are born and remain free and equal in rights. Social distinctions may be founded only upon the general good. All right? If you look at the two green lines, they are endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. And look down over on the Declaration of Rights of Man, number 4. These limits can only be determined by law. And the limits they're talking about is liberty consists of the freedom to do everything which injures no one else. However, that limit can be determined by law. Whereas with the American version, they're endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. Inalienable. The government can't take them away. Now, the French say the rights are liberty, property, security, and resistance to oppression. Those 4. We say among these are life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Among, meaning there's more. And that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. In the Declarations of Rights of Man and the Citizen, the principle of sovereignty resides essentially in the nation. No body or individual may exercise any authority which does not proceed directly from the nation. Declaration of Rights of Man and the Citizen, the state has the power and gives some privileges or rights to the governed. In the American system, the government gets its power from the citizens who conceptually can take it back. Very different concepts, and it work out very differently when it comes to politics. So again, in America, we were tired of monarchs. We didn't like an autocratic system. In France, they were tired of the nobility and the kings, but they kind of kept the autocratic situation going. Now you might say, who cares? That was France, that was 200 years ago. Well, that concept permeated throughout France and eventually throughout the world on where a state derives its power. The American example, not so much. So where does the state power reside? In the US, it's from the consent of the people. Rights the state cannot be encroached upon are listed in the Bill of Rights and amendments. We derive the powers from our Creator, meaning they're inalienable. The state has no business trying to take those away from us, except in extreme circumstances. But elsewhere, the state grants the populace their rights and can remove them if necessary. An example of this is, does everywhere have a First Amendment right? If you go to Canada, do you have First Amendment rights, or can the government lock you up for your speech? What about in England? Other places? What about a Third Amendment right? Can't quarter soldiers in people's houses. Is that true throughout the world? What about the Sixth Amendment, right to speedy trial? Is that enshrined in everyone's constitution and enacted upon? Not really. Okay, big generality time. Political ideology. In the US, we more or less believe in a free market, with the government having the lightest touch possible to make sure that people are not abused. And when we talk about right versus left, in general, the right says tradition works for most of the people, most of the time we should leave it alone. And the left says, yeah, but these laws and customs don't work for everyone, or they're relics of the past and they should be modified. And that generally becomes the issue, the discussion. Should kids go to school or should they be taught at home? If they're taught at home, who gets to make sure that the kids are actually being taught? That's a back and forth that we have. Elsewhere, you essentially have degrees of socialism. All right, so the state runs everything, more or less, and how lightly or how vigorously depends on each individual country. But within a socialist system, governments direct and protect business. And it's the same with the other aspects of life. So, as an example, universities. There are about 4,000 degree-granting universities in the United States. In Canada, there are about 400. But Canada's a tenth of our size, so that's not too bad. But France, which is about a fifth of our size, has 100 as well. So what does that mean? Well, it means the government is more involved in education, but that also comes at the expense of other innovative ideas being squished or not just being allowed. And when it comes to right versus left, when it comes to socialism, that's very, very different. The Tories, a right-wing party in England, they would say right-wing party, stands for the monarchy. Pretty sure you're not going to find too many Republicans standing up for the monarchy. So when people talk about right or left, you have to get into are they talking about the US or are they talking about somewhere else? So if they're talking about somewhere else, they're talking about a whole different concept. And trying to compare the two doesn't work. This basic concept follows along many, many other ways. Now, the court system, here's an easy example, okay? There are two major, in general, concepts of court systems. You have what's called civil law, which is what they use in Europe and other places, and you have common law, which is what we use, and the English and Australians and a few others. Now, in civil law, judges are more inquisitorial, all right? So the judge asks questions, and the lawyers for each side give answers. And precedent isn't that important. There was recently a judge jailed because he did not uphold the civil law. So precedent doesn't matter as much. What was written in the law, that is what is being argued, and whether or not someone transgressed against that. In the common law system, the judges are expected to be a neutral party. Each side presents their case in an adversarial system. The judge makes sure no one goes too far or that things out of bounds aren't allowed. Jury then convicts or not. And precedent is case law, meaning, if you find that stealing cows is bad, that becomes the precedent. But it can be overturned in certain instances. And if a precedent is overturned, that becomes the new law. Now, again, in general, you have direct elections and you have a parliamentary system in general. Now, the U.S., we have a winner takes all. If I get 51% of the votes in my congressional district, I am now the new congressman. Most of the world uses a proportional system or a combination. So some are majority, some use a ranked system, some use a two-round system. And usually with a parliamentary system, proportional system, the winning party or parties elect a prime minister who then selects cabinet members. Now there are other combinations. France, for instance, has a president and a prime minister. So the overall concept that we do things one way and other people do things another way is still valid, but there's lots of permutations to it. And if we think differently about how we elect our leaders, what else do we think differently about, and how will that impact the mission? So there you go. I hope you understand that false consensus, ethnocentrism, and projection can get you killed just as easily as tunnel vision in a firefight. Understand how people think where you are. Don't be judgmental about it. Understand it and work within those bounds, and you will do better. As always, a book recommendation. The True Believer by Eric Hoffer. Eric Hoffer was an interesting kind of guy, and he wrote a book that pretty much anyone in civil affairs should read. And he talks about the people who join mass movements and why. Helps explain why a fascist can become a communist, why an anarchist can be a communist, why people who join mass movements are more about the movement than what the movement purports to accomplish. I think you'll enjoy it. Now, as always, if you have any questions, comments, or disagreements, feel free to comment below or email me directly.